I'm Kelda Yoon. Residents in Mississauga are assessing the damage after yet another storm soaked the city over the weekend. Up to 170 millimeters of rain fell in some parts of the city, resulting in flooded basements, roads, and multiple water rescues. Mississauga's stormwater system is designed to handle a weather event like this once every 10 years. But this is the second time this summer that the region has been hit with a storm of this magnitude. Dale Manuktuk has more.
It was supposed to be installed today and everything was underground and now it's all ruined.
Jason Brown has been waiting nearly a month for his new kitchen to be installed and now will likely have to go another 4 to 6 weeks without being able to cook. On Saturday, his garage flooded and his family was unable to keep up with the pace of the water coming in.
The system they have, it goes to the creek, and when it goes to the creek and the creek is so high, the water won't go out, it just surges back. So everything comes up the drain and there's no stopping, there's nothing you can do.
It's a feeling of helplessness that Brown has experienced for 30 years. His home backs onto the Cooksville Creek. There was, however, plenty of help elsewhere in Mississauga.
We've done everything that we could. We had hundreds of first responders, police, fire, ambulance, even our recreation workers went out to go lend a hand, help evacuate people where they needed to be evacuated. We've had neighbors. We've done the cleanup as quickly as we could.
Mississauga Fire and Emergency Services performed 27 water rescues over the weekend and 8 elevator rescues. Several people, including children, were trapped in the Dixie and Dundas area, which is one of the municipality's vulnerable spots.
We know that there is a point within the Little Etobicoke Creek watercourse that has a tendency to spill over when we have that. It's not just a large volume of rain, but it's the volume of rain in a short amount of time span because the system doesn't have the capacity to handle that volume.
Rainfall amounts varied across the city, with some areas seeing as little as 6 millimeters, others as high as 170. It marks the second time in as many months the city has felt the wrath of a 1-in-100-year storm.
They're no longer 1-in-100-year events. And I think what we're seeing climate change and the impacts of climate change. So we're seeing these type of rainfall events happening more often.
Since the introduction of a stormwater charge in 2016, the city has invested over $230 million to improve its stormwater system and says future investments will be made taking into account the frequency of these intense storms. To help residents like Jason Brown.
Well, there's one program that helps people buy a sump pump. There's another one that you can apply for to sort of say these were the damages that happened. And if you qualify, like say you're on assistance, then we'll help you with some of those fees.
The city says it's too early to estimate the total value of damage caused by the weekend storm. Dale Manuktuk, CBC News, Mississauga.
Meanwhile, we're getting a clearer picture today of the cost of the extreme weather we saw last month. Initial estimates put the total insured damage caused by flash flooding in Toronto and other parts of southern Ontario at more than $940 million.
We know that all levels of government will be paying for infrastructure destroyed during this event, as well as damage to their buildings, perhaps. But also there will be some damage that just wasn't insured, whether people did not have insurance policies or it was over their limits. So with that staggering number, we recognize that that is just a portion of the damage seen.
Torrential rain, nearly 100 millimeters, hit Toronto and the surrounding area in mid-July, flooding transit stations, roads, highways, and countless homes and businesses. A Watermain break caused quite a bit of damage to a road in Mississauga today. Police were called to the area of Trescott Drive and Clarkson Road North at around 9 this morning for reports of a vehicle getting stuck in a hole. Police say the vehicle was removed from the hole and the driver was not injured. A spokesperson for Peel says it's not clear why the water main broke, but says it is not connected to recent flooding. A report looking into what caused the August 2022 crash of a Toronto Island ferry has been released. The crash left 20 people injured. Investigators with the Transportation Safety Board revealed their findings this morning while delivering recommendations on how to improve safety. Chris Glover has more.
Almost exactly 2 years ago, a Toronto ferry collided into the dock at the Jack Layton terminal, injuring 20 people, 6 seriously enough to need a hospital visit. The collision bewildering many passengers that day.
I heard like a boom.
It just stopped very, very suddenly, and
so everyone fall down.
Now, following an in-depth investigation, the Transportation Safety Board concluded the ferry was behind schedule and traveling faster than it had on any other trip that day.
At the time of the occurrence, the City of Toronto had not provided any written procedures to the crews in terms of speeds related to safe docking procedures. It was entirely left to the master's discretion to determine what was the safe speed to operate.
Safe docking speed rules are now in place in Toronto. The investigators also found one of two propellers did not engage when the operator tried to activate them to slow down the ferry, but it's still unclear why.
While we did not find evidence that there was a malfunction with the engine or the engine control system at that point, we can't say conclusively that there wasn't one. So there may have been an engine malfunction still during the approach.
In addition to what caused the crash, investigators also looked at how prepared the crew was and found no training on crowd management or evacuation plans.
Well, thankfully, there were a few serious injuries reported, and the accident happened close to shore. If an emergency had arisen over the course of the voyage, the crew and those on board will not have been properly prepared.
Investigators also determined the crew used a clicker to approximate the numbers, meaning they didn't know how many people to account for in the event of an emergency, and they didn't know they had too few life jackets on board for children.
Estimating isn't good enough.
It's terrifying to know because in that moment you're kind of like, you know, sink or swim and really.
Tasneem Dasu has been taking the ferry since she was a child. She's shaken to hear what investigators uncovered, especially about the children's life jackets.
I'm nervous now. I mean, I'm taking my son. I mean, and I think I'd still use it. I think maybe that was a one-time, lapse.
The Transportation Safety Board outlining 3 recommendations: to require training for emergency evacuations and passenger safety management, plus requiring crews have a firm head count of passengers. The TSB says this is the 16th report identifying similar gaps.
We've issued several concerns, again touching on the same issues. And now here again with the Sam McBride, we see the similar issues recurring. So that's why the board felt it important to issue new recommendations, because whatever actions that were taken in the past are not being applied consistently across the country, and more needs to be done.
In response, the city says after the incident, it quickly invested in crew training and getting more life jackets, and is committed to implementing all safety recommendations so that in the event of a more serious crash, its crews will be ready. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
The Ford government is reversing its previous opposition to green energy in Ontario. The province will be opening the door to proposals for new wind and solar power projects later this year. But one big question: will municipalities allow them to be built? Our senior reporter at Queen's Park, Mike Crawley, has the story.
Welcome to Melanchthon Township, home to about 3,200 people and more than 160 wind turbines.
We're not unhappy with the way wind turbines have rolled out in Melanchthon, but that's not to say there hasn't been problems along the way.
This wind farm, about 100 kilometers northwest of Toronto, was the first to be built in Ontario back in 2006. The Liberal government of Dalton McGuinty soon made renewable power one of its top priorities, even approving wind farms in communities that didn't want them. Then Doug Ford became Premier with a promise to scrap green energy projects.
We canceled those terrible wind turbines that is really, for the last 15 years, have destroyed our energy file.
Now, in what stands to be one of the sharpest policy U-turns the Ford government has made, Ontario is poised for its biggest expansion of green energy in years. In total, the province has plans to add another 5,000 megawatts of renewable power to the grid over the course of the next decade. That is 2.5 times what's to come from refurbishing the Pickering nuclear plant. Although some of that new production will come from solar energy, industry insiders expect wind farms will account for the lion's share.
The fact that the government has now had this about face on wind power and solar power speaks to how amazing this technology is, how fast it's growing in other parts of the world, how much the costs have come down.
Another key thing that's changed since the Liberals were in office, Ford's government will only approve projects that have the thumbs up from local council.
157 communities have declared themselves to be unwilling hosts, and those are communities that either have turbines already or are adjacent to jurisdictions. So they're quite aware of the problems that came with it.
Mayor Darren White says any companies that want to build more wind power in Melancthon will need to do their homework.
We're not going to pass a resolution just on a back of a napkin drawing. We want to see your plan. We want to see the locations. We want to see what the infrastructure is. We want to see what the benefits to the community are going to be.
The province is due to start soliciting proposals for new green energy projects later this year. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Melancthon.
Welcome back. As if the commute into the downtown core wasn't difficult enough, we've got a new intersection closure to tell you about. Starting today, Bloor and St. George will be fully closed for reconstruction. Clara Pasica has everything you need to know.
Metal fences are up, closing down the intersection of Bloor and St. George. It's all part of a larger reconstruction project that stretches ultimately between Avenue and Spadina. St. George and Bloor is closed for now, but it's all part of this larger project that will include a slew of changes. They include reconstruction of the road base and replacement of the asphalt surface, sidewalk replacement and accessibility upgrades, permanently raising cycle tracks, construction of a protected intersection at Bloor and St. George, and improving landscaping. I spoke to some commuters trying to get around by foot or cycling, and they had this to say about how they think the project's going so far.
So far it's been so good. We've just been following the lights and there hasn't been a delay. But yeah, so far so good.
I don't love it. It's definitely annoying in my walk to class, my walk to work. It's been going on for, I feel like, the whole year. I mean, I don't know for sure if it's actually been the year, but it feels like it's been pretty long, so I don't think it's going to be just a week. But.
A little bit cumbersome, but other than that, it's fine. I believe it's from the good book, patience is a virtue. That's pretty much the best I can say.
Now, cyclists didn't seem to be having too much trouble getting around this intersection, just going a few meters south on St. George Street and coming around here to the other side. And those walking say that the signs are pretty clear about what they need to do, but it could be tricky times for those commuting by car. Also, those using the Bloor night bus will find themselves in for a detour. That bus is now going to travel along Harbord and Hoskin during this construction period, during this section that would normally be going along Bloor Street. So a little bit of a tricky time for those commuters. But the good news is this shouldn't last too long, and the end is in sight. This intersection will only be closed for about a week until August 26th. Clara Pasica, CBC News, Toronto.
Toronto Public Health is reporting 116 cases of Mpox in our city as of August 14th. Toronto saw a spike in reported cases in late June and July. Health officials have raised concerns over a new strain of the disease called Clade 1B, which appears to cause more severe symptoms. TPH said none of the confirmed cases in the city are of that strain, and officials are continuing to monitor the situation. The federal government also announcing they are providing an additional $1 million on top of an existing $2 million contribution towards the World Health Organization's response to the Mpox outbreak in Africa. Chad Kelly is now reinstated with conditions to the Toronto Argonauts after violating the league's gender-based violence policy. Argos head coach Ryan Dinwiddie spoke about his return after practice today.
It's not going to be pretty when we go on the road, and I'm sure we're going to have some people at our home games that aren't really pleased that he's playing, and that's just part of it. He can't, get frustrated with it. You put himself in the situation, right? And then that's what's going to happen. Now he can either grow from it, or it can really put him in the tank.
The suspension followed an independent investigation into a now settled lawsuit filed by a former coaching staff member against Kelly for alleged sexual harassment, as well as the team for wrongful dismissal. The CFL said in a statement that the terms of his return include mandatory counseling and assessment by gender-based violence experts. Kelly apologized for his actions and accepted the terms of the last chance agreement. Coach Dinwiddie says Kelly's workload will increase this week ahead of the team's Thursday night game against the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Canada's two major railways could be shut down later this week. Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City say workers will be locked out on Thursday, and the union says it's ready for a strike. Negotiations between the companies and its workers are still at a standstill. The Teamsters Union is accusing the companies of trying to gut safety provisions. The Labour Minister is urging both sides to work hard to prevent a full work stoppage. A shutdown could hurt Canadian businesses that rely on rail to move goods and supplies, and it would affect passenger service as well. Aging or failing infrastructure may not be the most popular issue for politicians, but ignoring it can lead to big trouble, as witnessed by the broken water mains in Calgary in June and in Montreal just this past Friday. So this week, some provincial and federal leaders are meeting to discuss ways to keep infrastructure up to date. Rafi Bujikanian reports.
This broken water main was due for an inspection in just a few months, Montreal says. Now, city crews will have to sift for answers in its wreck instead.
I think our actions in the past few years have been showing that climate change or, replacing pipes is not something we just decided to say, we'll see. Knowing how unpopular it is to open the street and change pipes because it's not sexy. You don't win votes with that.
But some say the allure of the aqueducts is on its way.
We need to invest in infrastructure. Infrastructure is going to be sexy. You heard it here first.
The demand will only rise as more things break down across Canada, says this expert, like Union Station flooding last month. She says relatively short-term mandates for elected officials should not get in the way of work that needs to get done.
There's no quick fix to this kind of thing, as we suggested. So this infrastructure that I'm standing in is decades old, and across the country it's increasingly decades old, much longer than any political cycle.
At this meeting of Ontario's municipalities, the message from this province at least is it is paying its share.
We're building Highway 413 and the Bradford bypass. Shovels are in the ground.
But the cities say that won't do.
Our members are really keen to sit down with the province and have a thorough discussion about the provincial-municipal fiscal relationship. It isn't working. Municipalities are required to pay for more and more, and a good deal of what we raise in property taxes actually ends up subsidizing provincial health and social services programs.
And as municipalities across Canada say the federal government has to kick in more than $2 billion more per year in infrastructure funding, Ottawa says it's not so simple.
I don't think Canadians would accept that the federal government would simply cut checks to municipalities with no idea of where that money's going to go.
The federal government says it wants to see more accountability on how the money it provides is to be spent. It says it's open to a discussion on long-term changes to funding infrastructure. Rafi Bujikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
The first supermoon of the year that also happens to be a blue moon is lighting up the skies tonight. Sydney, Australia was one of the first places to catch a glimpse of the rare astronomical event. More cities witnessed the blue moon as the Earth turned. Now, the supermoon is when the moon is at its closest point to us, making it appear larger than usual. And the term blue moon doesn't mean the moon is blue, it just means it's the third full moon of 4 in a season. The London Zoo has begun its annual weigh-in for animals in its care.
So it's a day where we really get as much data as we can from our animals, and that database and that information is then shared with other zoos across the world, but it's also shared with conservationists, and they can use the data to help them when they're tracking animals in the wild.
The process involves weighing about 400 animals individually, which is easier said than done. The long list includes mammals, birds, and reptiles, but it still leaves out most of the zoo's 14,000 residents. To be fair, most of the excluded population includes tiny creatures like leafcutter ants that weigh only a few milligrams. All right, let's go to meteorologist Riley Lakechuck now with a look at the forecast. Riley, how's it looking out there?
Well, Caldo, I'll start with some of our daytime highs from today. And these temperatures, in some cases, Barrie getting to 16 this afternoon. This is a normal nighttime low for us. So a little bit off the mark in terms of daytime highs for today. Toronto, 18 this afternoon. Kitchener also getting to 18. We did see a little bit more warmth through southwestern Ontario, where we did see those 22 and 20 degree temperatures throughout the afternoon. And this is the pattern that we're getting into as we get into the day on Tuesday and certainly into Wednesday as well. Breezy, albeit a lot sunnier, and a lot drier. So starting the day on Tuesday, a mainly sunny sky, still a little bit of cloud hanging around, particularly into eastern Ontario. And this is the remnants of that system that impacted us over the weekend here, still making its way through Quebec and into the Maritime provinces. By and large, we're looking at mainly sunny skies as we get through Tuesday into Wednesday. And as I mentioned, a little bit breezy as well. We're looking at winds 20 gusting 40 in some cases as we get through the day Tuesday and into Wednesday. Could see some gusts higher than that, but generally we're looking a little bit breezy as we get through the next couple of days here. Quickly wanted to talk about Hurricane Ernesto as it makes its way up along the coast, the Avalon Peninsula in particular, still at a Category 1 hurricane right now. As we get into the day on Monday, particularly into the overnight hours, that's when we see it making close brush on Newfoundland and Labrador with sustained winds of 120 kilometers an hour. This not having an impact on us. Just wanted to mention that, though, just in case you may have travel plans. East could have some impacts in terms of high surf or some high winds, in particular off the Atlantic coast of both Nova Scotia and Newfoundland and Labrador. So looking at some of our wake-up temperatures for tomorrow, these a little bit below seasonal for this time of the year. So starting the day around 13 degrees tomorrow in Toronto. Hamilton, 12 degrees, 16 into the Niagara region, where we will see temperatures maybe a little bit warmer tomorrow. Even back into southwestern Ontario, temperatures 13 in Sarnia, 15 in Windsor first thing in the morning. So a bit cool, albeit not a bad night to sleep with the windows open if that's your thing. I know that's certainly my thing when I can do it. But we are going to see temperatures really held back as we get through the next few days. So only a high of 20 tomorrow. North winds 20 gusting to 40. Could see some breeze still on Wednesday. And Kelda, we do start to see our temperatures heading up by the time we get to Saturday, and we could see some high 20s once again by the time we start early next week.
Thank you so much, Riley.